Ladies and gentlemen, one thing, I always knew this opioid plague was far worse than anything they were telling us. First of all, when the CDC publishes numbers, they only base it on 22 states, but they put that number out annually as if it covers the entire country. It never have. So I'm not surprised that these stories are now coming out that it's far worse than anything they have reported on. And even in this report, I'm telling you, they're still undercounting. So this came out in the Atlantic, February 27th, 2020. The opioid plague might be much worse than we thought. It can be hard to comprehend the true scope of something as disastrous as the opioid plague. Perhaps that's why it's been compared with falling 747s and crashing cars. But in fact, knowing exactly how many people have perished is crucial to stopping the deaths, which they're not going to be able to do. You got millions of people out here strung out on opioids, ladies and gentlemen. It is, they waited until it got to the point where it's impossible to do anything about it. That's why Elaine Hill and Andrew Boslett, economists at the University of Rochester, were concerned when they found that many potential opioid deaths aren't counted as such. Right. So if you remember when Carrie Fisher died, she actually died from a drug overdose, but they put something else on her death certificate, which means she would not be counted as a drug death. And they have done that a lot. She's not the only one. It's many people they did that for in this country. So there's no way you would get a true number. In the fall of 2018, Hill and Boslett were studying how deaths from overdoses of opioids such as heroin or Oxycontin were influenced by the decline of coal mining and the rise of shale gas fracking. But when they began looking at death records of Americans who had died of drug overdoses, they noticed in more than 20% of the cases, the record said the type of drug could not be specified, perhaps because an autopsy had not been performed. In other words, the person had died of a drug overdose, but the death record didn't say which drug. How convenient. It's all to cause confusion so that nobody will be able to get to the truth. That's how they do many things in this society. Hill and Boslett realized that such a high rate of unknowns wouldn't work for the phenomena they were trying to study. Our lab wants to make as strong of a claim as possible, given evidence that maybe an economic shock had an effect on drug overdose rates. Boslett said, "We want to know that the estimates we're using on local drug overdose rates are correct or as correct as possible." So the researchers set out to try to determine the real causes behind those unspecified drug overdoses. So, ladies and gentlemen, of course, they're going to uncover things that we never heard so far, but in my opinion, it's still an undercount. Okay. In the process, they uncovered something unsettling about how deaths are tracked in the US. The way that a given county investigate deaths matter, and it could be dramatically shifting our nationwide estimates of the number of people who have died of everything, including opioids, childbirth, and the new coronavirus. He'll work with Boslett and a doctorate candidate, Alina Denham, who came up, who come up with a model to estimate how many of those unspecified drug overdoses were caused by opioids. To do it, they set aside some of the death records in which the type of drug was known and created a model that would predict the drug, given other things were known about that person: the county they lived in, their sex, where did they die, um, where they died, and other health conditions that contributed to the person's death, and so on. For opioid deaths, that meant factoring in whether the person had other characteristics typically associated with opioid overdose. Sorry about that. Loretta just kind of creeped up on me when I was doing this. For opioid deaths, that meant factoring in whether the person had other characteristics typically associated with opioid overdose, such as being addicted to opioids or having chronic pain. By applying the model to the unspecified overdose deaths, they were able to predict that 72% of those were actually from opioids. In fact, they estimate in a new study in the journal Addiction, there were more than 99,000 additional opioid deaths from 1999 to 2016. That's huge. That's huge. Y'all buried 99,000 deaths? Wow. Then had been previously documented, raising the national death toll by about 28% to 453,300. What's more, the discrepancies varied widely by state. In Alabama, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, Louisiana, and Indiana, Hill and her team estimated that the number of deaths from opioid overdose was actually double the previous estimates. Wow. Wow. I knew these states were underreporting. So that just go to show you the ones that reported to the CDC, they were underreporting, y'all. They were underreporting the whole time. Mm-mm-mm. Hill and her team suspected that because of differences in how counties across the US investigate deaths, in essence, whether a given county uses a coroner or a medical examiner to investigate deaths matter. Medical examiners are doctors, especially trained in pathology and forensics, but coroners can be general practitioners or even lay people with no medical training. For coroners in many places, like the state of Pennsylvania, the only requirement to be a legal adult with no felony convictions who has lived in the county for 1 year and complete a basic training course. Wow, that's all it takes to be a coroner? Wow. Jordan Kistner wrote this week in the New York Times Magazine. Meanwhile, as Kistner pointed out, the United States has a dire shortage of medical examiners. Because of this low standard of training, Denham explains, you would think coroners would not be able to identify opioid involvement in a death as well as a medical doctor trained in it would. That interference seemed to be held up by data. The states that had a lot of unspecified drug overdose deaths, Hill and her colleagues found, tend to use coroners in their death investigations. Interesting. Interesting, y'all. Mm-mm-mm. The counting of opioid deaths is important because you need to know the scale of the problem to know how to intervene in the problem. Then Kataramani said, dealing with a crisis like opioid addiction or coronavirus, for that matter, requires lawmakers and public health workers to make choices about whether to direct precious funds and resources. If the severity of the opioid plague is underestimated, local public health departments can be shortchanged and even more lives could be lost. This is particularly important in the case of infectious diseases like coronavirus, where knowing the total number of deaths can help public health officials estimate okay, yeah, but right now, let's face it, y'all, they are undercounting these coronavirus. I believe the deaths are undercounted too. I mean, just looking at an article like this, you know how easy it is for something entirely different to go on a death certificate other than opioid death or coronavirus? It's easy for them to do it. All they got to do is put pen to paper and it's done. And then that person is not counted when they should be. And they've been doing that all along through this opioid death. They don't want accidental drug death on their loved one's death certificate. So they tell them not to put it on there at all, and they don't do it. Especially in the case of addiction. So much of illness happens outside the public's eye that it's sometime only when someone dies that her neighbors or the government sees exactly what she was going through. The tragedy of plagues like opioid abuse is that nothing can be done to help the dead, but the dead can help others if the things that killed them are accurately reported. Well, that's the thing. America don't do that. You know, I don't care what anybody say. It should be a requirement for all 50 states to report, but it is not. Now, I'm going to see what they're going to do with this coronavirus, y'all. Are they going to require reporting from all of the states? Or are they going to do it just like opioids? 22 states report, that's it. When you have something of a large magnitude like opioids and coronavirus going on, it should be reported by every state, every county. I don't care. It should be reported. But this country they always want to hide things when it looks negative. They don't want that out there when it really should be out there. Having a better grasp of how just many people are dying from various ailments is crucial for policymakers to help those who are still living. It makes you wonder, do they really want to help in the first place? Wow. Mm-mm-mm. That's a huge difference. They undercounted their estimating. That's just an estimate. 99,000 additional deaths between 1999 and 2016. That's huge. But y'all, please tell me what you think. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.